Welcome to Grammar 5K. In this booklet, we will go over infinitive phrases, participial phrases, and diagramming infinitive phrases. So let's jump right into infinitive phrases. So we already know quite a bit about infinitives, and we're going to just add on to that today. We are going to learn about how infinitives can have a subject. And before we jump into that, what we need to do is we need to understand a type of infinitive that's kind of unique and different from what we've been looking at so far. There are things called bare infinitives. And when you have a bare infinitive, what this means is that the to of the infinitive is omitted. And usually this is to make the sentence flow a little bit better. So let's look at one example without a subject first. Kyle dared refuse. Well, Kyle is our subject, and the action he is completing is daring. And what is he daring to do? He is daring to refuse. But we don't put the to in the infinitive, we just omit it. You could put the to in there, Kyle dared to refuse, and it still makes sense. But sometimes you may want to use a bare infinitive when you're writing, and it just makes the sentence flow a little bit better. Kyle dared refuse. Now let's look at an example with a subject. So, I let her play. Once again, we have found our subject and our verb, and we have the two words after that, her play. Now, notice that play is a bare infinitive. It's not the main verb, but it is a part of the direct object. And her is the person completing the infinitive, the action of the infinitive. So if we look at it by itself, it's just like a simple sentence, her play. Now notice, her is an objective pronoun. We're going to get to that in a few minutes. But this is the basis of an infinitive phrase with a subject and a bare infinitive. Now let's look at an example without a bare infinitive. We have the sentence, Larry wants Mary to sing. Now notice in this one, like I said, there is no bare infinitive. We include the to, because if you took out the to, it wouldn't really flow as well. Larry wants Mary sing. That sounds kind of awkward. So we're going to leave the to in there. Once again, this is something later on when you're writing it might be helpful to know, but right now we just want you to understand how this phrase works on its own. So notice how the whole phrase is a direct object, and Mary is the subject, to sing as our infinitive, and it's the action being completed by Mary. Now let's go back to pronouns in the infinitive phrase. Notice that it will always be in the objective case, because remember, the subjective case we keep for the subject or a PN. All other pronouns in the sentence are either going to be possessive or objective, and so in this case, we keep them as objective pronouns. But notice that when we have a name, the name is just the name. Even though Mary could technically be a subject in another sentence, it is going to be acting as the subject of the phrase. But when we use a pronoun, it would be Larry wants her to sing. So just keep an eye out for that, because remember, when you do a gerund phrase, it's a possessive noun or pronoun. So let's jump into an example. The teacher heard Kendra answer the question. My number one recommendation is to always find the subject and verb first, and then all the phrases and all the modifiers are going to be a lot more straightforward to find. So teacher is our subject for the sentence, and what is the teacher doing? She's hearing. She heard something, so we're going to double underline heard. Now we have Kendra answer the question. Well, we can see answer is going to be a bare infinitive, and so we are going to understand that the entire phrase, Kendra answered the question, is an infinitive phrase, because if you leave anything else outside of that phrase, it really doesn't make sense in the sentence. And in this book, we are going to have you rewrite those phrases and identify the parts of those phrases. So Kendra is our subject for the phrase. She is completing the action of the infinitive, and then question is receiving the action of the infinitive. So we're going to label it as a DO for the phrase. And then we are going to identify, is it functioning as something within the sentence or is it modifying something in the sentence? And remember, infinitives can modify, so you want to watch out for that. But in this sentence, we are having it function as a direct object. Now let's jump into participial phrases. So we've already gone over some present participial phrases. Now we're going to reintroduce the past participles and include the present participles. So let's look at the example at the beginning of the book. We have, I saw the brightly wrapped gift first. So brightly is modifying wrapped, and brightly wrapped is modifying the gift. So brightly is technically an adverb modifying wrapped, which is an adjective because it's modifying gift. Now remember that when you have brightly wrapped, that means the whole entire phrase is actually modifying gift. I'm just breaking it down for you. Now let's remember that present participles act like adjectives, and therefore they can also have adverbs describing them as well. Happily playing, my sister smiled. So now let's look at two examples outside of the book. The shop sold the beautifully displayed candles. Once again, I'm going to find my subject, shop, and my verb, sold. And then what is the direct object? It's candles. Is it being modified? Yes, by beautifully displayed. Notice how I did not include the in my past participial phrase because the is not modifying displayed. The is modifying candles. So you don't include it in the participial phrase. Whether it's past or present, don't include the article unless it's modifying, which it won't. It's only going to modify a noun. So I'm going to rewrite my phrase, beautifully displayed, and I know that displayed is my past participle, and beautifully is modifying displayed. So I'm circling it, I'm drawing an arrow to the modified word. Now that whole phrase is modifying a word, and it's modifying candles. So that's what you'll do in this booklet with the past participles. Let's look at one more for a present participle. So excitedly singing the song, Daniel astounded the audience. So once again, we're going to find our subject, Daniel. What is he doing? He's astounding. So we're going to double underline astounded. And then in the sentence, we want to find our present participial phrase. It's going to be excitedly singing the song. And I'm going to write that down on the phrase. And I'm going to find the parts of the sentence. Remember, our verbal is singing. So what is being sung? The song. So that's our direct object of the phrase. And excitedly tells us how he is singing. So it's a modifier for our present participle. And the entire phrase is modifying Daniel. And that will be how we deal with present participial phrases in this booklet. Now we're going to get into sentence diagramming with infinitive phrases with subjects. Our sentence is, Mom, feeling generous, let Simon play games. So I'm going to underline my subject and double underline my verb. And then, is anything receiving the action of this verb? Yes, the entire phrase, Simon played games. And so I'm going to bracket that. And then within that phrase, I have a subject. So I'm going to do a thin line underlining Simon because he's completing the action of play. And games is receiving the action of the verb. So I'm going to put a DO over that. And then I have one more phrase, feeling generous, modifying mom. My verbal is feeling, and generous is the PA of this sentence. So I have figured out every part of this sentence. I can start making my diagram. I have one long line. I intersect it, so I have a subject and predicate, and then I have a DO, so I make another line like that. Since I have an infinitive phrase, I need a pedestal, and then I'm going to have a very long line to write all of my infinitive phrase on. And then, because it's an infinitive phrase, I need a diagonal line, and then I have a direct object in this infinitive phrase, so I need another short vertical line. And then all I have left is my present participial phrase, so I draw a curved line, and since I have another part to the phrase, I make that a long tail at the end, and since that other part of the phrase is a PA, I have a slanted line. Now I can start filling this out. I have a subject and a verb, And then I have my direct object as an infinitive phrase. Notice that our verbal play is a bare infinitive. So I put to in parentheses because it's an omitted to. And then play is my verb of the infinitive. Simon is my subject. Games is my DO. And then I have my modifier for mom, which is feeling generous. Now notice that I have generous as a different color than feeling and Simon as a different color as to play games. And that's so you can see that generous is the PA of the phrase and Simon is the subject of that phrase. But remember, each of these phrases as a whole is acting as one part of speech. Feeling generous is a whole adjectival phrase. Simon to play games is a whole direct object of this sentence. So it's important to see both the details within the phrase, but then also the phrase as a whole. And that will be how you diagram that sentence. We've got a present participial phrase, and we have an infinitive phrase with a bare infinitive, a subject, and a DO. If you have any questions over this or anything else in grammar, please contact the person who grades your grammar at your Gideon Center.